I wouldn't want to accidentally say something about the very sensitive topics that we were talking about before we went live, because we are live now. But I'm giving Cecil Lammey some room to snip this off. We missed you, Cecil.
Yeah,
I had Frank Schwab on the show this week. Schwab.
Really?
Yeah, it was great.
Did he wear a Cecil rug?
No, he wore a Wisconsin shirt.
Okay. All right.
So it was still like choice, typical, on target Frank Schwab. It's great.
We need to get Cecil wigs, though.
We do, with the yes.
With the question mark hair? Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Welcome, everybody. Thursday night live. And it's fun. It's fun to get together. It's fun to have these rituals. And we have a fun Matt Waldman article to talk about. As we are in the off season, usually we'll be getting some OTAs, some mini camp stuff. We're still getting good, beat writer analysis and some press conferences or phone calls, Zoom calls, if you will. Coaches are revealing things, so we'll have all of that to talk about. Matt, I have to ask: did our conversation last Thursday night inspire in any way your wonderful gut check this week?
It was more of a. I think it was more your article about tight ends and different tiers, and I just started thinking about how certain players are more volatile than others, and how and thinking about volatility. I thought, why not explore quarterbacks who might lose their job or have a chance ranging from low chance to really high.
I agree, and that's funny because one of the things that I have on my list to do, which I'll never get through, I'll never actually get it all done, is I wanted to put together this year, Matt, like a offense fragility ranking. Which offenses have the most to lose if their quarterback gets hurt, with an added multiplier of how likely is it that the quarterback gets hurt, or as you mentioned, like quarterback changes that aren't necessarily because of injury. There's things that we should be factoring into at least risk. And then, you called your article getting Tannehill. There's the flip side. I don't know if that, certainly if you look at like Chicago and maybe the idea that Nick Foles will be a more competent passer in the Matt Nagy offense than Mitchell Trubisky, there's some upside to quarterback change there. But, and wide receiver, my wide receiver tiers came out today. That was a monster.
Oh, well, we got to talk about that too.
Yeah, we will. And I mean, really, the main thing people need to know about wide receiver is go 40 or 45 names deep. You're going to like the names there. Like, you can just take the tank to E. Like, you could probably take no receivers in the 5th round and get away with it this year. So that's fun. Okay. It was a really great piece.
Oh, well, thank you.
What I really liked about it was, of course, because I liked that it mentioned me, but just starting off the piece with a definition and coining a new word and getting Tannehill is wonderful because it's literary. And the thing is, like, it's too bad. We need the interface of football guys where you could really go totally David Foster Wallace, like footnotes. Like, if you could start footnoting gut checks, oh man, the footnotes will start to become in and of themselves interesting, a picture of the mind of Matt Waldman. But when you say that somebody got Tannehill and you coin a word out of it, what I think you're getting at is it was a remarkable event. It was something that we understand as like an archetypical version of something that can happen. Wally pipped, right?
Exactly.
And are we so old that nobody even knows what that means anymore? Of course, not that we were around for Lou Gehrig. So getting Tannehill, and I think that, and then you give the fantasy advice or the implications of that, and probably the least, you count them down from 12 to 1, and it's the names, not number 1 or number 2 or 3 or number 4, but after that, or maybe because I was thinking about when you said Daniel Jones is a fraud. That was great. It's one of my favorite moments in a long time. As far as just to soak it in, and Daniel Jones is on that list, and Baker Mayfield who is on that list. But what I really like about this article, other than starting off with the literary term, and anytime as writers we should all do this. Anytime you can get your readers to learn a new word, it's great. The anthemaria, fantastic. That's beautiful. Like I think we should all practice that. Language should be loose. Language is a place we can all play and invent and create in.
And we've been practicing anthemera all these years with getting bloomed.
Getting bloomed, yeah, exactly. Turning a noun into a verb, and otherwise just creating language. That's how language happens. It happens organically. But what I like about this, Matt, is you're understanding that within the range of outcomes for these 12 offenses is a quarterback change. And we should think about what that would look like. Even if it's, on the Green Bay side, like 0.1%, 0.1% things happen in the NFL every year. Every Sunday, 0.1% things happen. So we got to grapple with that. When you were writing this article, this gut check, which offense scared you the most or gave you the shivers? Where like now because you did this deep dive, when you see players with that name next to their team name next to them, you'll pause a little bit.
I think probably the one that worried me the most is the Raiders. Because really you look at Derek Carr and it's just, it's been pretty much proven that play action on structure plays, he's very good. Off structure, under pressure, he's bad. He's horrible. And now it's like, so my thought is why did you get Marcus Mariota? Because if they're going to say the rationale is we got Marcus Mariota because he's athletic and he can buy time in the pocket and make plays with his legs, then I just want to give the raspberries to that explanation. Like the minute I hear it, I just want to be like Archie Bunker going, when I hear it, because it's like Marcus Mariota may be more athletic and buy more time on a literal level, but in terms of what he does, to actually make effective plays, he's still awful under pressure. Like he's Derek Carr with legs. So it's like, it's not really all that much better. You got the same kind of player, if you ask me, in many respects. So it's not, it just turned into John Gruden. Like, I just wonder if John Gruden got abused by a quarterback when he was a boy or something, because he just seems like he just grinds away at that position, and it all starts rosy and there's this honeymoon period and how it's gonna end. It's like he's like the Liz Taylor of quarterback, coach marriages or something. I don't know, like where he's gonna go through a ton of them. So you see what happens with Mariota. It's like, are we really going to get, but Carr's a baker for absolutely, no, that's great. But the thing is that with either one of them, with Carr, at least you have a fighting chance of like some deep plays to Ruggs and to Tyrell Williams and maybe Brian Edwards down the line. But with Mariota, we saw what happened. Like he couldn't get things off the ground with Corey Davis. He really couldn't. He was up and down with AJ Brown, though, to be fair, maybe Brown was getting his legs as well, but he sure looked ready whenever he got the ball. And then he couldn't get things going with a number of receivers other than the tight end. So when I look at this, it feels like if Carr gets switched out for Mariota, this offense is going in the tank, other than like, again, Darren Waller and, and then maybe Hunter Renfrow. And this is going to be a team that's not going to be able to score, on in terms of to its receivers. It's not going to get a lot of big plays to its outside receivers, and it's not going to be as dynamic as it should be. And this is a team that's just going to, sink into mediocrity.
And it's funny when you talk about this, what it makes me think about the Baker and the Chef and Carr within structure, because look, we have to give Carr a fighting chance. I mean, he has a good offensive line in front of him, a very good offensive line. Colton Miller, if he gets better, the Raiders have one of the best offensive lines in the league potentially, which is something that can mask a structure-based quarterback whenever it allows the structure to persist longer in the play. It just creates a larger margin of error. But it's also the kind of offense that can look vastly different depending on opponent, right? Like we can look at the early schedule for Vegas, Carolina, New Orleans, New England, Buffalo. Oh, like you can imagine that a team that's 1-3 at that point, coming off of 3 stinging losses to New Orleans, New England, and Buffalo, and now you're hearing about Mariota. And then at that point, the next game is Kansas City. Guess how many points Vegas scored against Kansas City last year? In both games, 19 total points against Kansas City. Kansas City's defense has their number. Now they go into a bye.
Yeah.
Because Matt, like I said, what this requires is projecting possibilities in the season. So can we tell a story that Derek Carr is benched by week 5 after the bye? Yeah, right. Like
Without a
Marcus Mariota
doubt.
comes in the fourth quarter. They're down 35-3 to the Chiefs. Marcus Mariota comes in the fourth quarter, and then it goes into the bye. Who's going to be the starter? And it's at Kansas City, by the way.
Yeah.
Game's at Kansas City. So you can, and then you have to reckon with what that does to your Raiders, and it's not good. It's in maybe Mariota finds something, and obviously the Raiders want him to, because that's the whole thing, Matt. Like the contract they gave Mariota is like Chekhov's gun, right? It has all these incentives and escalators built in if he gets all this playing time, and so on. So it's almost announcing to Carr, like, if you can't do what we want you to do, we're ready to give this guy a chance to do your job, and we think he might be able to do it better than you.
Yeah.
So that's like, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's just, and again, I think when we hear the rationale, it's going to be because he has legs and he can create on his own, which are fallacies really about his game. And when we hear that, we're going to be laughing in about in 6 to 8 months, depending on when this gets going. So it's just, it's tough because Josh Jacobs is still going to be Josh Jacobs. It just may not have as big a holes to be able to open up if teams are like, look, we're going to dare you to throw it because we're not that scared of you. And certainly the Darren Waller side is going to work. He'll be the Delaney Walker in this offense. And then you're going to see, the wide receivers be treated like Taywan Taylor, Adam Humphries, and Corey Davis. And we've seen how well Corey Davis has gotten off the ground. And we saw, which hasn't really been much at all. You're going to have a bunch of mediocre wide receiver play because their quarterback isn't very good at being able to buy time and find openings without throwing it into the thick of coverage or getting sacked and giving up, 3 and outs.
And maybe the offensive line can help Mariota.
Maybe.
It won't be good for the passing game, though. And they have a lot of good pieces to the passing game. But it makes the Raiders kind of an avoid. And one of the easiest things you can do, and one of the ways, I don't remember exactly when it was, Matt, when I passed through the threshold of really thinking a lot about a player as a subset of a larger fate with a team and an offense, and then working backwards in some ways when you're thinking of the narrative of the player, trying to unravel what the projection for the player is going to be. You're thinking of all the individual factors under their control, but it's all these other factors that aren't under their control that often tells the story of why their season went well or why it didn't. And with the Raiders and with some other teams, again, every year, this is probably an article I should write, but I talk about it so much on the show that I don't feel like I need to. Every year, there's like 5 teams at least that you can just put a line through the team and say, I'm not going to take any, I'm not taking any Patriots this year. Come on. I'm not going to take any Patriots this year. Chargers. These are teams on your list. Hey, you're probably, like you mentioned, Kendall, Keenan Allen, maybe Austin Eckler. But, you can look at offenses and say, these offenses probably aren't going to create overachievers.
Yeah. And you can, and the thing is, it doesn't mean you avoid them at all costs. It just means you're not going to draft them. If they start to overperform, well, it'll probably happen like later in the season, or like the midpoint and later on. And some of those players are going to be available on the waiver wire. And it probably won't be the players that people drafted. It'll probably be some injury replacement player on those teams that's performing better than anyone expected because Austin Eckler got hurt. So no Justin Jackson gets in that role, and now it's free money. It's like that's kind of the situation for this, that when you look at how these things work, if you avoid the players that are being drafted, that on draft day, it's the waiver wire guys that probably will have more value to you from those teams.
Yeah, well, and timing it again. The Giants are another team on your list. And sometimes when you look at the schedule after it comes out, it imprints something on you, so that as soon as you see that team name, you think, and I will keep reminding everybody, Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco. Pittsburgh, Chicago, San Francisco. If the team is 0-3 and got humiliated in those games because Daniel Jones is oblivious in the pocket, then you're going to see Kyle Allen. I'm sorry, you're going to see, my brain is like
Colt McCoy.
Colt McCoy. Right. But what is Colt McCoy? Colt McCoy and Jason Garrett look like they could be related, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yep. And Jason Garrett was a backup for the Giants at one point who got into a game.
Yes. So that again, when you start projecting how the season's going to go, then they play the Raiders and they play Dallas. Actually, wouldn't that be perfect? Like week 5 at Dallas, Daniel Jones just craters. Alden Smith got reinstated this week, by the way.
There you go.
So that's interesting, but it makes me want to say no Giants, no thank you. Maybe Saquon Barkley if you draw the number 2 pick. And that doesn't mean, like you said, that you're just swearing off Giants for the whole season, because if things can get going or if injuries. The other thing is they didn't even have one game last year with all 5 of those guys, Barkley, Ingram, and the 3 receivers, Tate and Slayton and Shepard. And now that, of course, on its face is a big indicator that says they're probably not going to have all 5 much at all this year. Ingram maybe being the biggest culprit likely to miss time. So you don't know what this offense will look like with everybody there. It could become more efficient. They drafted Andrew Thomas. Maybe Andrew Thomas takes a little while to get going. So you're open to change. We're always open to change during the season. But we also can do our best to project how things are going to go at the beginning of the season. On this note, we talked about Cleveland. Cleveland plays Baltimore. But then Cleveland plays Cincinnati, Washington, Dallas. Then they play Indianapolis and Pittsburgh back-to-back. That ain't good. But, what do you think? Oh, and let me go back to the Garrett one. Just when I say Kevin Stefanski offense and Baker Mayfield, word association, like what do you think? Like what kind of picture is painted in your head?
Those inflatable guard rails in the bowling alley for the gutters. Like sure. that's what I
like
think.
Jake Plummer, Brian Greasy, right?
Yeah, exactly. They did it for Kirk Cousins. I think this is and when you look at it, it's like what they finally realized is, or the other way I put it, I was on a podcast with Mac Robinson in Cleveland today, and what it was is that they finally figured out that they drafted the dessert in the first round and they drafted the steak in the second round when it was Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb. And, and it's always fun on a Cleveland podcast because I can talk about Nick Chubb and nobody gets sick of it. But it's one of those scenarios that it took Cleveland 2 years to figure out that no, Baker Mayfield isn't the centerpiece of this offense. The run game is. And now they have 2 of the best running backs in the league on the same team, and they can run the hell out of the ball and do what Minnesota did. I mean, when you look at it, there were only 2 receivers of note, really 1 receiver of note due to the fact that Thielen got hurt. But it was really like 1.5 wide receivers and 2 tight ends who were worthwhile along with the running back. And in this game, in this city, you're going to have, Janovich, who's going to be lead blocking. You're going to have a decent run blocker in Austin Hooper as the inline guy. And then you have, Landry and Beckham, and that's enough. And so for Baker, it's going to be designed rollouts. It's going to be situations where you ask him to get rid of the ball quick, ask him to throw screens. He's not going to have to step up in the pocket, which he can't do very well. You're not going to ask him, to stay in there too long because he drifts or he ends up, making poor maneuvers, trying to be everything. And they're not going to have to do that. And as a result, when you add those 2 tackles that they have in Cleveland, even though that will help the pass rush a little, limit the pass rush some, what it also does is now you're opening up bigger creases for Nick Chubb, who, when I did the show with Dan Hatman in the Scouting Academy this month, what we looked at were all these, we looked at all these plays where there were at least 7 men in the box. And what you saw with Nick Chubb was that he was literally making plays that helped his blockers reach linemen when they weren't initially able to reach them. So he was actually making his blockers look good. So when we talk about running backs don't matter, he's teaching tape for why they do. And if you can give Nick Chubb clean lanes where he doesn't have to work twice as hard to get 4 to 10 yards, he's going to wind up with 50, 60, 70-yard gains, huge gains in this, So I think this is a guy that can give you 1,500 yards this year, even with Kareem Hunt in the backfield, if getting 600 to 700 yards. I mean, I think this is an offense where the 2 backs are going to combine for 2,000 yards. And if one of them gets hurt, I mean, if Kareem gets hurt or Kareem Hunt does what he did at the end of this season, which was get pulled over and He's still lamenting the fact that he didn't win a Super Bowl with the
Mhm.
Chiefs, and he self-destructs. Nick Chubb can be a 2,000-yard rusher.
Yeah. Well, in the same way that you look back at last year, and I know Dalvin Cook got hurt, and I know that it wasn't a great ending to the season if you took Dalvin Cook in the first round. However, or the second round. However, all the offseason hype that Minnesota offense was going to be a Dalvin Cook offense was on the money. Straight bullseye, one of the most important fantasy takes of the offseason to get right. And if you said, this is a Dalvin Cook offense, and Dalvin Cook is really good at the things, so they're right. It should be a Dalvin Cook offense. And it's going to be a Nick Chubb offense and a Kareem Hunt offense.
Yeah.
And they're good at those things, and they're right to make it the offense revolve around them. Beckham is still interesting to me because it's hard to know how much of what we watched last year, well, how much of it was Freddie Kitchens and the shift run adrift, and how much of it was playing with that injury all year. And what we're going to see is that little extra oomph that was missing last year is there this year. And this offense can create big plays for him. Like we could see every other week he's getting a long touchdown because the offense is set up to create those plays. Stephon Diggs had a stretch like this last year, and made Jarvis Landry be healthy. And they've got the horses for it now, especially at tight end. Your guy Harrison Bryant, in addition to Njoku and Hooper, and they have Wills and Conklin.
Yeah.
So I think we're good.
Yeah, and if Mayfield doesn't get it together, if he's like not making these big plays, Case Keenum. I mean, listen, his best year was under Stefanski, with Stefanski being the the quarterback coach. And while he didn't play in this offense specifically, this offense is built for him too. I mean, it's Keenum is a good play action passer. He'll attack deep. He can buy time better than Mayfield does. You don't need the strongest arm in this offense. It's just a matter of, again, executing what's on point. And really, this is a design play type of offense, especially the screen game. This screen game, the thing that impressed me the most about the Minnesota Vikings offense last year was how many different setups they had with alignments and motion and shifts to create the same type of middle screen or flat screen, where it was either going to a tight end or it was going to a back, and it was set up in a way where you could see 6 different ways to run like 2 to 3 different screens. And it was really effective. And Mayfield should be very good at this.
Yeah, it seems like it's some of the things that he was good at Oklahoma and why we liked him so much. And he can be very accurate if what he's asked to do is something that is more timing based and just linear, and not something where he's dealing with a bunch of ever-changing variables, which last year. It's funny, too, because, again, we may look back on 2019 and just see in hindsight that it was a mess. The Browns were just an absolute mess under Freddie Kitchens, and it was a disaster. Did you see, by the way, the talk about Chad O'Shea and his season last year?
No, tell me about it.
Oh, wow. I think it was a bleep show, according to one player. Almondo Salguero is the writer for the Dolphins. Yeah. Hold on. Let me pull up the actual quote. One player described it as an expletive show, noting O'Shea tried to teach an offense that was too complex for a young team and that teaching instruction during film study was a disaster.
Oh, boy.
So, and then enter Chan Gailey. I know Miami, another one of the teams with the Tannehill. So what we know what Chan Gailey did with Ryan Fitzpatrick. We know they're totally rebuilding this offensive line. You have positive momentum from a guy like Devontae Parker. They add Jordan Howard and Matt Breida, so they have some semblance of competency in the backfield after what they had last year. After
for sure.
Draco. What do you? So again, like, is there this idea? What we sometimes don't understand is that, like, last year's Browns offense, like, we may look back and see it. It's like they were running with a 50-pound weight on their back.
Yeah.
Like how big of a weight, when you start to learn things like this, does it make you look back at last year and say, well, maybe Miami's offense could be improved just from that alone?
Oh, without a doubt. When you look at how well Devontae Parker played and Preston Williams played, and Preston Williams was a undrafted rookie, and he played that well, and then Gesicki still continued to climb in terms of what he did. And then you still have, I mean, Peyton Manning's sitting there doing analysis on Josh Rosen saying he wasn't so bad, when he saw him in the game. So, between Fitzpatrick and Tagovailoa, this should be a much better offense. And with Gailey, we know he's been able to be successful pretty much wherever he goes. As
with whatever he has.
You could just imagine him like he's that in the movies. He'd be that guy out like deep sea fishing somewhere, and like somebody's like, "Yep, an NFL team called you again. They want and he's like just got the boat set up, and he's like heading out of the dock, and then he gets the call, and you can see him just doing the U-turn to redock and just like head back to the NFL and like do what he does, which is make mediocre players look pretty good, so I think that he's going to be able to help Miami an awful lot. And this is an offense that I actually do want something of. I didn't want to touch anybody in this offense for the past few years, but Matt Breida, maybe a little overvalued because of the injury factor, but a fantastic running back. He and Jordan Howard are both fantastic running backs. And then you have, if Williams is going to be ready by the opener, he's a guy that you don't want to overvalue him, but Devontae Parker's on the money. That's a guy you get.
There's too much skepticism out there. Matt, he's like going in the 5th or 6th round. Like it's people aren't buying it because I guess we just were scarred from all the times we bought it.
It's like Mark Ingram thing.
Yeah,
Mark Ingram. Yeah. We had the same issues with Mark Ingram for the first 4 to 5 years.
Sure. Even whether it's Tua or Fitzpatrick, you like Parker. Preston Williams, as you allude to, depends on his recovery, but sounds good. Gesicki is a fine. Hey, I'm going to wait at tight end, take a shot, and see what happens. And then the running game, and it might be frustrating for fantasy, but if Chan Gailey is flexible and makes like one running playbook for Jordan Howard and another for Matt Breida, and it tries to cross train and be ready, I mean, look, in coaching the NFL today, I was talking about this with Tom, I think Kislingbear and Adam Sekas, I think his name. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name. A wonderful show. And one of the things we're talking about is trusting your players. Like having multiple modes on offenses and defenses means you're trusting your players. Because in some ways, whenever a coach institutes a rigid system, again, as you've talked about, it's this idea that the coach is like, well, they brought me in to do this. I'm going to do what I did back there. But also, when you institute a rigid system, you're taking a lot out of the player's hands. You're taking a lot of improvisational ability or decision-making or otherwise talent, ways to affect influence the game, and you're putting it back in the hands of the coach. Do it this way, I think I was talking about a foosball table with Frank. Like the foosball table greatly limits where the players can move, and a rigid scheme limits the players in the same way. And while it means like we're going to do this really well, and if you can't figure out how to stop this, we're going to steamroll you. It means you can't change modes, and that's what today's NFL is about. So you can do that with Breida and Howard. It'd be frustrating for fantasy football in some ways, but they're both good running backs. Like they're both good at what they do. You just have to set them up to run the ball the way they run the ball.
I love the foosball analogy to the point that I just had this crazy just idea like of imagining Mike Holmgren at the foosball table with that red cherub looking face, getting frustrated as Brett Favre takes himself off of the foosball pole and pulls like down, scrambling around and doing all the things that he does,
ducking under the head, the feet, everything.
Like we could just see an animated like Pixar kind of type of the biography of Brett Favre, except on a foosball table where he like literally lifts himself off the foosball table. Yeah.
Exactly.
There we go.
Defying that. And by the way, on the article, since it's Barry Jackson, Adam Beasley, and Armando Salguero from the Miami Herald. It's funny. Word choice is so interesting. Like the article, and it is to have all three on the byline. That's meaningful in and of itself. And it said that when they brought Chan Gailey out of retirement, 68-year-old Chan Gailey, on the day after last season ended to replace O'Shea, there was some level of bewilderment in NFL circles. But conversation with multiple sources close to the team, including player feedback, offered clarity. Hey, drink clarity. And they said that O'Shea was trying. One player said O'Shea was trying to run plays that were used in New England, which was predictable because, well, he'd been coaching in England for 10 years. And
they wanted that.
Right. And they said that he made the situation worse by complicated advanced elements that Tom Brady and Josh McDaniels used. It might be second nature to Brady, but it confused the Dolphins. And O'Shea would go to Flores and say, someone didn't know the playbook. and they felt O'Shea is not really doing a good job teaching it.
And
Um,
and think
yeah.
about it this way. Like imagine like one of the fantasy footballers coming onto our show on a regular basis. They would be lost because of all the inside jokes and all the history and all the things there. Or if we went to one of their shows, like it would be that kind of thing where it's like, even if the people have certain level of skill or understanding or background, if you don't bridge that gap well, especially if you're going to a team where there's years and years and years of backstory and history and layers built up on that. It's not going to work as smoothly right off the bat like that. And especially if you're a young player and there's so many things that you have to learn to be great at first, you can't start playing around like that.
So. I mean, just knowing the room, right? I mean, know the room.
Know the room. Play the melody.
I mean, and look, the article throws a little shade, says, in his defense, the Dolphins averaged 25 points a game in the second half of the season. And it said the way that O'Shea was fired and also the circumstances were peculiar, Matt. Peculiar. He was in the middle of his exit meeting, and one of his assistants, Flores' assistants, interrupted him and told him that O'Shea wanted that Flores meet with O'Shea. He was doing an exit meeting, with Fitzpatrick. O'Shea's meeting with Fitzpatrick, and the assistant comes and says, "Hey, Flores wants to see you." And he told Fitzpatrick to give him a minute, and he didn't know that he was about to get fired. And he came back, and he told Fitzpatrick he just got fired. And O'Shea was blindsided. And then that same day, it was learned that Gailey was going to replace him. And whether Flores asked Fitzpatrick about Gailey is unknown. So anyway, interesting. So you can tell by the people writing it aren't necessarily buying that like Flores is the good guy and O'Shea is the bad guy, or maybe even that the firing was totally warranted. Even it's going to be interesting to watch.
It really is, because I can tell you this too.
Yeah,
I know that this organization, that there was some turnover in other areas of the operational sector, and it was basically characterized that the people didn't know what they were doing. Like the people that were hired really didn't know what they were doing. And it was on a much lower level of the operational ladder in terms of what goes on, but still it's something that usually isn't screwed up this badly.
Well, that's the thing, right? Again, if we had perfect, I've mentioned Scott Reynolds. I think he just celebrated 25 years covering the Bucks, which is awesome. Said something like, what I could put in a book if I could just write a book, half of the stuff that I'm privy to, if you all knew. And certainly, like I always say, peeking through keyholes, we see, and we're most interested in that surface level, the outcomes, the statistics. But those things are that's just the tip of the iceberg, and under the water is all this stuff that we try to speculate on, and these little dribs and drabs from beat writers. Again, these guys know a lot more than they can write in this article. But look at what they're choosing. Look at the word choice. Look at what they're choosing to reveal in the article or otherwise focus on as a part of the story. And, it's kind of actually, being kind of level and even, giving the players a voice, but also making sure that the reader knows about these other things. So it's going to be fascinating. I mean, this is what occupies me, Matt, other than putting together like rankings and comments and things like that. It's just the teams that are likely to change. What do we see? How's that going to go? And just trying to understand as much as we can about what's going into that. And then there's also teams, like the Falcons in your neck of the woods, that you wonder, like, is smoke going to come out of the hood? Has it been too long? Last year they narrowly averted like the chopping block and so on, where we look at these overarching narratives of these teams and we wonder, what's the next chapter? I was looking to see what's the next chapter since we talked Tannehill, like, do you think he's going to regress and look like, there's a Miami connection for you. Is he going to still not necessarily be quite as flawless as he was last year, but still on any given week, one of the above average good quarterbacks playing in the NFL?
I think he will. And I think the reason being is Well, it comes down to offensive line has to be helpful. So, did they find a good replacement to Jack Conklin? That's going to be a big question. But if they feel good and their offensive line works out, I think that this is a simple team in a lot of respects. It's the tight end, it's AJ Brown, and it's Derrick Henry, and as long as those three players can help out Ryan Tannehill, they have their trio, they're going to be fine. And I think that that's likely the case. And Tannehill does buy time a little better than Mariota does or Mariota does. So I think there's that. And I think that he's been a little bit more accurate in the deep game. So, maybe he doesn't go quite on the tear because every team's now going to be ready for AJ Brown in a way that they weren't maybe, mid-season. And so, Brown's going to still be very good, but he might not be like killing people the way that he was down the stretch. So yeah, I still like that. And Atlanta, I'll just answer that too.
Yeah.
It's just, I think that I think the offensive line, they got the right reinforcements with Atlanta's offensive line. And the problem is that, McGarry and the kid from Boston College that they had, Lindstrom. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Those two guys were hurt for much of the year. So the offensive line looked bad. And that caused some struggles. But once those guys got plugged in and were healthy, the line looked good. So that's always been the issue with Atlanta. Like if you don't give Matt Ryan a line, Matt Ryan's going to basically look. Most quarterbacks will, but Matt Ryan, sure, like especially so, you almost see him kind of getting frustrated and being like, "I give up." Like he gets like. He's like underrated Jeff George material when his line really starts to get awful at this point in his career. So that's better. He should be better.
And that's one of those things that creates that otherwise mysterious variance, right? And, it's just that if it's an opponent where they're going to be able to get him out of his comfort zone, then he's going to struggle. I mean, oddly, when the defense has been bad, the other big turning point for them last year was Raheem Morris and Jeff Ulbrich taking over the defense. And then the defense was actually very good. But if you take Matt Ryan, and fantasy football is weird, because Matt Ryan can still have great numbers. Austin Hooper can too when he's playing terribly, because the game is such a landslide that for the half of the fourth quarter or more, he's just getting to do like a drill or practice. But the offense should be better, and it should be better with Todd Gurley. What do you think, by the way? Julian Correa asked, where's Freeman signing? He's turned down $4 million from Seattle, Philly. What I want to know is just, does Freeman have anything left in the tank? I mean, should teams even be kicking the tires here? Like, what's Freeman doing turning down $4 million and a chance to play with Seattle?
I think he's thinking that he can still be a starter in the league. And I think that he's getting a rude awakening at this point. And the big issue there is that he is just on that border. Like, you can see how if he was just a little bit quicker, if he could stay healthy, that it's there. And you can see how he's looking at his line and saying, my line wasn't good for much of the year. And when my line's been good and I've been healthy, I've been good. And I get that. And he's a high-end competitor, intense competitor. So he's one of those guys that he's hoping for a chance probably where somebody gets hurt and they need him. Like say Derrick Henry gets hurt and they need a back who can like carry the ball a fair bit and run that offense. Well, sorry, Darrington Evans, truthers, he's a scat back, and Tennessee is a place where scat backs go to die. So I think that Devonta Freeman's a guy who could fit into a system like that. Or if the Bears lose David Montgomery and they don't feel like Ryan Nall can help them out, then Freeman could get a chance to start and prove himself and make money. And I think he wants to play. I don't think he's as much about I want to get paid as much as I want a realistic shot of actually playing. And I think that's why he turned down that money in both of those areas.
Right. Well, and sadly, the story you describe is that, and it's the story that running back's a young man's position and so on. At least he got paid once. That's tough for running backs to do now. That he may see in his mind's eye a player that he isn't anymore. And the bar just gets higher and higher for running backs every year anyway. So we'll see. We'll see. Poor Devonta Freeman. I mean, before the injuries, he was just he again. Sometimes you watch players, Matt, and it's like they get the most out of what that body was going to give them the potential to do as a football player. Maybe their body doesn't give them the potential to do things that other players can, but man, they get the most out of what they have. And Devonta Freeman was that kind of running back for sure. You mentioned David
Tampa would be
Montgomery.
another place too. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no. Tampa makes a lot of sense. Although, again, because they spent the pick on Keyshawn Vaughn, they're not going to do that. Maybe they'll do it. Well, Keyshawn Vaughn. Actually, I was probably even a little more underwhelmed compared. I mean, Keyshawn Vaughn and David Montgomery were both players that weren't going to end up on any of my dynasty teams or my redraft teams for that matter. Because of the expectations, there's that graph, right, where they compared David Montgomery, like they almost made it sound like David Montgomery was like Bo Jackson or something, right? Like he has this superpower of this running back and this superpower of this running back. And I think it set expectations so high that then you watch David Montgomery, and while there's things to admire about his game, like he just doesn't pop in the way that his reputation led you to believe. And I think how a lot of people drafted him or coveted him in fantasy leagues led you to believe. However, Matt, because I think you and I don't think we've been diametric opposites on him. But I've certainly been more skeptical than you. But I see it now. It's the off season, and I think there's a school of thought in fantasy. Volume is king, right? Like if you can tell me that running back's going to get 300 touches, then I'm going to value that greatly. And maybe David Montgomery, what did he have last year? I don't even know, 270 something touches or 280, 290, somewhere in that vicinity.
Yeah.
And there's no reason that he won't have that again. I don't know exactly what his ADP is and what some of the other choices are. I can take a look right now. Just 55th. I mean, so he's in the same part of the draft as David Johnson, Jonathan Taylor, Mark Ingram at running back, and then DK Metcalf, Cortland Sutton, Stephon Diggs, T.Y. Hilton. Quarterback wise, you're looking at like Kyler Murray, Zach Ertz, or say a Darren Waller.
My point is, heck no. I mean,
go on.
Yeah, heck no. You're not going to take him over all those guys that you just mentioned. I mean, I have David Montgomery. I'm doing my projections for my rankings that I'll have up at Football Guys sometime early next week.
Sweet.
And David
we'll
Montgomery.
Have a lot to talk about next Thursday.
We will. David Montgomery, I have for 250 attempts, 1,010 yards at a 4.04 average, 7 touchdowns, 25 receptions, 200 yards. So it's not bad. It's slightly better than what he did last year, but it's not so much better that you're going to be like running out to take him, especially where his ADP is. And that's given the idea that he's a little quicker this year because he has a full season to work out, because he understands what, what's really going to be expected of him. And maybe he's had a chance to actually study his own tape and see that there are certain plays that he tried to bounce outside that he shouldn't have, and that he can be a little bit better with decisions that he makes and therefore be quicker. And, I'm with people who are like, I just don't know if he's ever going to have the athletic ability to be a top end back. But then the counterpoint would be, people felt that way about Ray Rice, and Ray Rice added a little weight, got a lot quicker in his second year. And a lot of backs get a lot quicker in their second year, both from a conceptual, intellectual standpoint of reading creases and understanding what to do, to also just physically getting quicker. So if he does that, then yes, we may have something there, but we're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, I still think that what you saw, and my impression was watching him at Iowa State, is just he's just not sudden enough to run the way that he runs in the NFL and consistently. I mean, sometimes it just feels like your brain feels like he should be further downfield than he is at this point.
Yeah.
And it isn't that it's again, like some of the times you just get to the limitations of a body. And you can do certain things with training, and guys can remake their body and so on, but we'll see. Like you said, decision making is part of it, but I think it's almost, again, with the idea of Freeman, it's like having a different estimation of what your body can do on a field than what it really can do. And that's what's so beautiful when you see players that's in total harmony. Watching Dalvin Cook in Minnesota last year is a good example of that.
Yeah. Patrick
And
Mahomes, because I can, that's, I will always remember that, just, but that's true. It's just that thing, is that if you know you can do it, you can take even bigger risks. And a guy like Montgomery, we're at that point where we look at him and go, well, can he change his style, which is going to be a difficult thing to do? Or is he going to be able to get a little bit quicker because he was at Iowa State as opposed to the University of Iowa or Ohio State? Possibly, but it's no guarantee. It's kind of like everyone relying on Antonio Gandy Golden to get into the weight room and get he already looks like he's a ripped dude who's very strong, but he's slow. So is he going to be able to get quicker and faster and play the level that he could? Well, Terrell Owens kind of did. He turned himself into that. So it's possible. It's just not something you can bank on right away. You got to wait and see.
Yeah, it's just aspirational. It's one of those things like relationships come up, romantic type relationships come up often, where it's like you're seeing the potential for someone to change, but we overestimate the ability of people to change. And in hindsight, I look back on like Sammy Coates. I mean, some of it's my Steelers homerism, but I can remember we were having conversations about Sammy Coates. I'm like, physically, it is all there. He just needs to learn how to track the ball a little better. And wow. And in hindsight, like, why did I ever think that he was going to get better at tracking the ball than he was? That's one of those immutable things. Yeah. And you look back on some of these things, and sometimes the NFL has it wrong. Sometimes we can just come right out and say, like, it's what we do. It's funny sometimes whenever people like consume our work and say, well, why do you think you know better, or something like that? Well, okay, you're right, but that's what we're doing. Well, on the Patrick Mahomes thing, really quick, since you mentioned him, how much of that is having Andy Reid as a coach? Because I know in Buffalo they were writing these like what if pieces. What if Buffalo had stayed put and taken Patrick Mahomes, right? I mean, they traded down and they got Tre'Davious White and they got Tremaine Edmonds the next year with the picks. I mean, so it isn't like they didn't get good players. They got Josh Allen, and they talked about how, well, Sean McDermott had just been hired. Doug Whaley was still the GM, so he hadn't really had a chance to bring in Brandon Beane. They weren't going to make a quarterback decision without the full team in place. This is where a team can kneecap themselves when they hire a coach to be a coach king and have a new regime. But the first year, it's like you're not allowed to take a quarterback this year, basically, because you don't have a GM and you don't have like all your staff in a way that you would feel really confident. And who knows? They may have taken Mahomes, they may not have taken Mahomes. But has Patrick Mahomes become Patrick Mahomes in Buffalo or anywhere else other than with Andy Reid?
I think a lot of people ask that question about every team, and the answer is, does he become the MVP caliber player that he was, who wins a Super Bowl and comes back in the fashion he does and throws for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns? No, he doesn't become that. Does he become the player I kind of projected that he would, which would be kind of like a young Brett Favre or a young Elway, someone who like can give you a 25, 35 touchdown season, but also maybe throw 15 to 20 interceptions, but way more touchdowns, interceptions, and plays like what we saw that were just unbelievable, but maybe the offense isn't quite imaginative enough for him, and he has to break the bonds of the offense in order to make those types of plays like Favre did. Then the answer is yeah, that's probably what he was, which would make him still a star in the league. He just wouldn't be what he is right now. This was the best confluence of that, because he still made those decisions and he still saw the field in a genius sort of fashion with Texas Tech. And if you don't believe me, go watch the RSP film room with Mark Schofield and I. We joke around. We had more moments of giggling like little kids watching Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, where he makes plays that you're just like, nobody does this. And the way he did it wasn't one of those things. It was one of those things that you could project. You could really look at it and go, he saw that. This wasn't like, I'm Matthew Stafford and I'm going to try and squeeze this in there and my arm's faster, more powerful than everybody else's. This is more like, I see this and I'm hitting it so on time that it's incredible. And he does that. He does that on a regular basis. He did that in his first start against the Broncos. I mean, you can watch Dan Orlovsky going gaga over a post throw, where he reads the coverage well. and just hits it with such great timing. So, the thing with Mahomes is no, he's not going to be the statistical fantasy guy that he is now if he were with Buffalo. But would he have been still a guy that you'd put in your top 5 to top 10? Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you're right. But the important thing that just people need to know as you outline, like the things that he does were there, and you just had to be. I guess it doesn't seem like it should be that bold, but because I think, and I'm sure you've heard this at length before, Matt, is that Patrick Mahomes presented a kind of puzzle for quarterback scouting in the NFL that isn't one they get very often, and obviously some people failed it, but not Kansas City. Not Andy Reid. And was it John Dorsey who was there at the time too, I think? Yeah. So, and that's why people were getting excited about Baker and Dorsey and things like that. But that one kind of went meh. It's great that they won a Super Bowl, Matt. It's really great that like on the all-time, it's too bad that every sport doesn't have something like the Stanley Cup. It's like the name is etched on the trophy for all time. Like the trophy that the next champion's going to get, that they're champions, that the Reid Mahomes only in their second full year created a championship. And that's exciting because we can talk about any number of things in the AFC. It's still like who's going to catch up to Kansas City. How refreshing is it that we're not saying who's going to catch up to New England? And then the NFC, as usual, is a free-for-all, although down here in New Orleans, they're going to be very, very, very disappointed. And it's funny, too, because Jake Later said something this week about Taysom Hill is, Lamar Jackson, basically. Or some sort of Lamar Jackson, if even ever. And Pat Thorman, love Pat Thorman, by the way, said that, just something to the effect of like people still don't understand how good Lamar Jackson is. Wow.
Just shut up. Shut up. It's like, right? My God. Just shut up.
Did say that there was that Sean Payton did say it's not clear that Taysom Hill's the backup to Trees. Goes and flies.
Oh, it's not? You mean Taysom Hill isn't clearly better than Jameis Winston?
Yeah.
Shock. Yeah. I mean,
right.
As bad as Winston has been at times, give me a break. This whole talk about Taysom Hill is just redonkulous. We need I need to start throwing Jason Wood-isms into my conversation to just be as apoplectic as he gets about certain subjects. And I just love watching him with some of the vocabulary.
Voice goes up an octave.
Twitter. Yeah.
Oh, it's great. No, and I think that what we're really going to hopefully get to see out of it, right, Matt? Like, please, football gods, next year, like, I don't want to say, I'm in New Orleans, so I can't say, can we wish for Drew Brees to retire? Okay. But, to get to see Taysom Hill go into the season as a week 1 starter and just see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen, but that will be great. That would be entertaining. That would be much awaited and, probably embarrassing for Sean Payton and company, but maybe not.
I want another Drew Brees Super Bowl, though. I'm a huge Drew Brees fan, and this year, man, I understand why people feel the way they do because good defense, good run game. You add Emmanuel Sanders. I mean, you just basically took like we talked about last week. I just think that it's a massive tectonic shift that you made with one player.
Disappointing for them if they don't go to the Super Bowl this year and really win the Super Bowl. Although, how can you be disappointed if you lose to Kansas City or Baltimore for that matter? And still, San Francisco has to say about this. Tampa and Tom, that's going to be a big storyline. Have something to say about it. Maybe Dallas. I don't know. Dallas has an interesting puncher's chance with the
for sure.
There. So we'll see. Hopefully, we'll see. Right, every time at the end of these conversations, season. And as we wind up, I want to say, please be safe. And I'm going to go a little further and say, like, at the end of every show, I think I started it in early March. Go ahead. What were you going to say, Donna?
I was going to say, good. Do it, please.
Good. Yeah. I started signing off the show instead of classy. I think I started with wash your hands, like in early March, and then became like wear a mask and social distance. And I've been doing that. And I do that because I care about, if you're listening to the show, like you're giving me something and I care. And I'm really, I don't want to care about like being right or wrong about things.
You're a fantasy football analyst. How could you?
Right. Exactly. That's there you go. The line of the show. The line of the show. But I'm not saying this to be right about anything. I mean, I read, I try to inform myself about things, and I can at least understand like the range of possibilities of exactly what's going on. So when I say wash your hands, and I say wear a mask, and I say social distancing, what I'm really saying is keep yourself safe. Be here to come back next week. And I've even said this at the end of some of the shows. Like we want everyone to stick around. But I want to say this too, because now we're at a crucial point in this. And I don't know. I mean, maybe because of the weather, maybe because we spend more time outside, maybe because of some things we don't know yet, maybe we could reopen America and still not have big outbreaks and fires to put out, but we don't know. And the reason these practices are in place is because they're pretty well proven to lower the chances of transmission. So I think it's yes, let's make everything go back to normal. Yes, patronize our businesses. Yes, as much as we can resume something that makes life worth living to us. But please, for yourself, for your community, take these things seriously and be an example for the people around you. Be an example. Go ahead.
Can I add one thing? It's a simple analogy. When you're driving down a highway and the speed limit sign is 65 or minimum or maximum 70, but on a normal day, you can drive that way, and you can even break the rules a little bit, and that the cops aren't going to probably, pull you over unless you're like 9 miles over the speed limit. Whatever it is, you know how to bend the rules. But what about that same highway when they have the orange construction cones and the lights, and you've got construction workers out there to try and improve the safety of the road so that your car doesn't hit a pothole and flip at 70 miles an hour? But now you've got to slow down to 50, 55. And you've got to do that. Are you really going to be that selfish idiot who says, no, I'm going 70 while there's construction workers, 5 feet away from me operating tools on that highway behind these cones? Or are you going to slow down and respect the fact that, they're trying to help you out in the long term, and you can do the least bit to kind of make the adjustment necessary just until they remove the cones fully? To me, this is all that is it that big of a deal even if it turns out that the mask didn't need, even if you didn't need a mask, it turns out in hindsight, is it really that hard to just be considerate that way?
Well, it's an interesting thing, Matt, because it's very visible and it's very conspicuous whether you have a mask on or not. And I think it's one of those things where there could be a tipping point. I don't even know what I would say about New Orleans right now. And any sample is not going to be scientific, but, sometimes it feels like 10% of people are wearing masks out, maybe 20 at the most. And I feel like there's a tipping point where if 30 or 40% did, then 80% would, right? If enough people were doing it, then everyone would be like, well, I guess this is just what we need to do. And other cultures have adapted to this in recent times, with SARS and MERS and things like that. It's not that big of a deal. And I hope this just doesn't have to be something that's a new skirmish front and this who's right and who's wrong. It's just about caring about each other. And I hope, and the thing is, I feel like talking to our audience, I know that our audience
preaching to the choir.
Right. But the thing is, I think if everybody is vigilant and faithful about doing these things, it can become viral. You know what I mean? The more you see these things, the more likely these practices are to proliferate. And we can be kind of leaders in just a small gesture of taking it seriously. And then that encourages more people to take it seriously. And we'll see what happens. We're at a crucial point now. So we talk football and we do what we do. But of course, big drama life is happening in the background, and it's not lost on any of us. We appreciate the opportunity to get to have this departure distraction with y'all. And giving us the opportunity just to get to hang out. I mean, I have an excuse to hang out with Matt Waldman for at least an hour every week.
Sigmund Bloom.
Yeah,
I get to peek in through his door window here. Do you like this little setup here we've got? I feel like I'm listening to the side of your little window door
You're
like this right now. Yeah,
exactly. That's funny. I like that. I saw the thing where they had the rookies all pass a hat to each other that turned into the hat that the team that got drafted by.
We could do that here.
It was really good. We had like 25 people on a Zoom call. They were all like passing a hat to each other, and it was turning into the hat. It was really cool. That's I don't know. That's too technological and too synchronized for me. But I can do this. I can hang out and talk football with people that I love, and otherwise talk about the sport that's so stimulating for you people out there that we all love. So thank you everybody for giving us this opportunity. Lots of wonderful things going on, football guys. Join us every day. There's new wonderful things for all of you, always, because you are so very classy.